Iran as the #1 foreign policy issue of the United States in the coming decade. Can you talk about your perspective on that point? Mr. Ambassador, we'll start with you.
I am an optimist. I want to make that clear. I trust that in this room there are a lot of optimists. You wouldn't be working here if you didn't have some degree of optimism in you. I like what others have said. You can't begin pursuing a problem in the military, nor with the Foreign Service, nor with our diplomats, without some degree of optimism, because optimism, as General Powell always used to say, is a building block in the pursuit of any problem confronting us in diplomacy or in the military. You've got to have some degree of optimism to begin with in trying to tackle problems, and that's always been my experience and my belief. Granted that some of us get in trouble, as I did, of course, in Tehran. But I look back on that experience also as a building block, a big one. As you know, I spent 444 days as a hostage in Tehran. I have never been back, nor have any of my colleagues held hostage, the 53 of us, 42 of whom remain. The 42 who remain, not one of them has ever been back. Have I ever been back to Iran? No, but I've been to Abu Dhabi and Dubai, and I could see Iran from my hotel window. So in that sense, I'm, quote, some degree of expert, unquote, on Iran. I don't pretend to be. I have never been there since. I do what I can to keep informed of what's going on in Iran. I read my newspapers. I keep in touch with the Department of State, my colleagues on active duty down there. Let me say in that connection, part of the, I know I'm getting ahead of the program, I suppose. One of the things that we are doing these days in public diplomacy, if you will, is augmenting our capacity to reach out from here to the broader world out there, particularly Iranian Americans. We have now something like, when I began in the Foreign Service, when I began my association with Iran, we had one desk officer for Iran in the Department of State. One. That was it. Today we have something like 14, quote, Iran watchers, unquote. This is the name that is, title that is used for the much augmented staff of the Department of State in dealing with Iran. That's a plus, in my opinion, building the kind of understanding that we need across the country for Iran and all that it's up to and what we are doing in terms of coping with it. Those Iran watchers include Iran watchers in Dubai, in Jerusalem, I think, in Abu Dhabi, in various places in Germany, busy doing, among other things, issuing visas. Visas have never been, let me ask at this point, how many of you have been to Iran? A half dozen of you. You've all been there as tourists, I suspect, or possibly as members of an Air Force contingent who looked down on Iran at some point, possibly even in connection with Desert Storm and the attempted rescue of me and my colleagues. But those Iran watchers out there are busy today in a relaxed visa procedure for Americans or Iranians trying to study in the United States. We used to have thousands of Iranian students among us, many of them perplexing you, bothering you at that time before we were taken hostage. But today we have something like 5,000, a much reduced number, but there are 5,000 roughly, more or less, Iranian students studying in the United States, passport holding, issued by posts outside of Tehran, obviously, and they are being issued visas under a relaxed program that permits them to obtain 2-year limits, frequent entry into the United States in the pursuit of their studies. That, in my view, is a big advantage to help us reach that segment of Iranian society which has always been troublemaking, perhaps, but also very much the future, representing the future of their country. I've never been back, but I care about Iran a great deal. We should all care about Iran a great deal, because in my view, what happens to that place in the years ahead is going to impact a great deal on the policies and problems we confront throughout that region, particularly, of course, in the near Middle East. And we can talk about that in a more detailed way if you want. I'll leave it at that, just as an introduction to what I know and don't know about Iran.
That is a wonderful introduction, Bruce, and I'd like to turn to Ken. I know that you all agree on some things and disagree on some things when it comes to Iran. Do you see the students here and the students who return to Iran as part of the future solution to U.S.-Iranian relations, or are they a complication?
Well, Bruce and I agree on one thing. Here's the map of Iran today.
We know it's there.
We know where it is. I'm not sure we even agree on who lives up here in Khorasan, or who lives here in Loristan, or who lives in Kurdistan, or what their relationship to the regime may be. I'm going to talk not about Iran, but I'm going to talk about the Iranian regime. And I think it's very important to distinguish between the two. I've spent the past 20 years working pretty intensely with the pro-freedom movement inside Iran in various iterations. I'm the president of the Foundation for Democracy in Iran. Our website is iran.org. I think that's easy to remember, iran.org. And we've been involved with them since the mid-1990s. I have to go this afternoon to Quantico to teach a class. I work in the Iran Threat Seminar at the Joint Counterintelligence Training Academy, teaching younger members of the intelligence community about the various flavors of opposition inside Iran. And in particular, one of the lessons I try to teach them is that when you look at this map, which I was told would be up here on the screen for you to see, it has a lot of surprises. There are a lot of surprises in this map. One of them is that Iran, as we know it, people think that it's Persia. It's not Persia. All around the periphery of the country are ethnic minorities. Azeris in the north, Kurds in the northwest, Avazis, who are Arabs, in the southwest, and all kinds of others, Turkomans and Baluchis in the east. And most of these minorities are disaffected. They have been neglected at best, at worst, openly repressed by the central government in Tehran. We have never, as a country, exploited this in any systematic way. My foundation has contacts with a lot of the leaders of these ethnic groups and their people inside Iran. So we work with them very actively. Just another sort of, I'll give you self-promotion before I go into what I'm going to say. This book, Countdown to Crisis, which is my book on the coming nuclear showdown with Iran. It's no longer available new, so if you want a copy, you basically got to go and get a used copy from the internet. It's not very expensive, or you can get it, I think, in a Kindle edition. This is packed with classified information. Packed with classified information. Theirs, not ours. Okay. I spent a lot of time interviewing defectors from Iranian intelligence, speaking with family members from very, very senior people in the regime. I mean, extremely senior people in the regime. getting their inside stories of what has been going on the past 20 to 25 years. And here is a basic framework I'd like to give you. I think that our approach towards the Iranian regime for the past 32 years has been an utter disaster. It's been a disaster from the time that Bruce was held hostage, and it's been a disaster ever since. This regime has been at war with us from the moment that Bruce and his colleagues were taken hostage. And we have been thinking that they could actually want to negotiate with us. I discovered through WikiLeaks the other night a brilliant cable that a newly arriving DCM in Tehran sent back to the State Department in August of 1979. And he was talking about the Persian mentality and about the recent negotiations with the new regime between the embassy in Tehran and the people who were close to Khomeini. And here are just a couple of the things that he pointed out. He said, here are a few lessons that we need to keep in mind. He said, first, one should never assume that his side of the issue will be recognized. He said, second, one should not expect an Iranian readily to perceive the advantages of a long-term relationship based on trust. He makes a few others. And then he says here, fifth, cultivation of goodwill for goodwill's sake is a waste of effort. That cable was signed Laingen, the gentleman here next to me. I think for 32 years we have attempted to cultivate goodwill for goodwill's sake, and it has been, as Bruce Laingen pointed out in August of 1979, a wasted effort. Let me put it to you differently. Robert Gates, who recently retired as Secretary of Defense, used to say that the State Department and various people in the intelligence communities and some of our politicians have been engaged in these elusive search for the phantom Iranian moderate for the past 32 years. One of the original members of my board at the Foundation for Democracy in Iran was a dissident Shiite cleric, Ayatollah Mehdi Rouhani. He was forced out of Iran, lived in exile ever since the regime came in power in 1979 because he believed in a truly more moderate, reformist version of Islam than that was practiced by Khomeini. And he used to tell me, Ken, if you're looking for a moderate, Khomeini is the most moderate of them all. There's your moderate. Some of you might be...
Who said that?
This is Ayatollah Rouhani, Mehdi Rouhani, okay, a Shiite Iranian cleric. You also might remember that about 10 years ago or so, there was another Iranian religious figure, businessman as well, but religious figure, who was asked publicly about the possibility of a nuclear exchange with the State of Israel. And he said, yes, it is possible that we could be engaged in a nuclear exchange with the State of Israel, and it would be terrible. Millions in the world of Islam, i.e. Iran, will be killed. But the State of Israel will be wiped off the map, so it's not so bad. Now, he was a moderate. His name was Rafsanjani. He was a moderate mullah. So as we look forward to the future, you asked about future scenarios, where we're going from here. I believe that we're headed for a confrontation. I believe that the future lies in either revolution in Iran, which is something that I would thoroughly support and think that we ought to be engaged in. We should be helping the people of Iran to liberate themselves from this absolutely wretched regime. Or, if we do not do that, we will be faced with the consequences of a nuclear-armed, expansionist Islamist regime that will possibly use its nuclear weapons. Now, do we know that they will? No, we don't. Do we know that they won't use nuclear weapons? No, we don't. This is not the Soviet Union, where mutually assured destruction was a strategy. It was something that we could build upon. We had some confidence in mutually assured destruction. We have no confidence whatsoever in the future behavior of this particular regime once they are armed with nuclear weapons. So I see confrontation ahead or revolution.